I moved out to LA about, 10 years ago, and a mutual friend called me up and said that this guy needed a sound man for his senior thesis over at USC. And I just decided, okay, I'm not doing anything today, and it was probably going to be like a 2-week shoot, which turned into like, 3 months or something like that?
Yeah, running out of money, finishing it, yeah. So, and we were doing this project where the tone was kind of melodramatic, and after a while, dealing with such melodramatic material, it's like we have the same sixth sense of humor. And we just realized maybe this is the wrong project to be working on, but we should be writing together and, and collaborate.
The Butterfly Effect is a supernatural movie with a twist in that it's really dark, edgy, and gritty. And it's very controversial, and it goes places that no other films go. And when we set about writing anything, the first litmus test we have is, have we ever seen this in a movie before? And if we have, we back off and go in the completely different direction. And we try to come up with the most really cool, mind-blowing experience, roller coaster of a ride film we could come up with. And yet at the same time, since it's so grounded in horrible themes of reality on this planet, the things that human beings do to each other, it's interesting because a lot of it has a lot of reality. It's of our lives in there. I mean, because it's a supernatural movie, you'd think that we just created the whole thing, when every little character or nuance somehow comes from our hearts. And, it's why it's our baby more than any other script we've written. There's so much personal stuff that's sort of ingrained in the middle of this supernatural story that seems to have no basis in reality.
We looked at the project, it was like there's so much really sort of taboo subject matter that we knew that in the hands of anybody else, if they weren't personally attached to it, when push came to shove, they'd probably back down on a bunch of things. And we just knew we wanted to keep the integrity of the script that we kept. And, everybody hears about, their project that they won't give up, but, this was the one.
Eric and John came to JC and I. We managed them as writers, and they brought us this screenplay. Actually, I think JC read this first and was blown away by it. He gave it to me. I read it on a plane. I think I was flying to Colorado or something. By the time I got off the plane, I was like completely affected and shaking, and I called JC and I was like, this script is crazy.
These guys are incredible writers, and the way that they put this story together, there's so much to keep track of when you get into something like this, and they really, it makes sense.
The original ending that I read intrigued me tremendously, because I really wondered if somebody had the power to put themselves away before they came into this world. And I thought it was a great concept. And it's not the theatrical ending as we all know it, but I don't know, that somehow grabbed me. And then after I met the two directors, we had lunch. I met them once in their office, and then we had lunch together. And I fell in love with them, and I fell in love with the story. And I think it's very powerful. And it's mind-boggling, and you got to pay attention when you watch the movie. But that's good. Makes you think a little bit.
This is, out of all the things that we ever wrote, this is the one that we were like, we won't sell. And when we wrote it, we needed the money more than anybody ever needed money. And it was like a constant battle between the both of us of like, all right, let's sell it. And it was like, no. But, we held on to it and struggled, and we wrote other projects just for the hope that, eventually we could do this project.
This script got them the Final Destination 2 writing assignment. Once New Line kind of had faith in them as writers, got to know them, they figured they'd give them a shot at this. And it's an intense script.
It's been through every possible incantation. I mean, I think the first draft might have been 85 pages, and he was still having blackouts in the present, and it was a completely different thing. By the end of it, it's completely different from where you started, but I mean, I couldn't be happier with the final product in this case.
The great thing about all the different layers of the script is that it's so complex and thick that you're never quite sure what's happening, and I love that.
We deal a lot with the subject of incest and child molestation, which we've
que dos
personally have lots
tráilers.
of friends
Visita
that
mi
their lives
canal.
have been affected by it, and it's something that's a subject that really means a lot to us. And so somehow we were able to go take that idea, marry it with the supernatural element, and somehow it just, hopefully, it'll be a viewing experience that people can really take a lot from.
It was really important for us that when people watch this film, despite how supernatural it is, they can relate to it on a personal level. And we think there are so many dark, gruesome elements that are covered in this film that are still instantly relatable, and everyone has either been through a horrible experience that will be featured in this film or knows someone very close to them, and it was really important for us. And I gotta say, New Line Cinema was the only studio out there with the guts to actually take this project under their wing.
You know, it's not something that's extremely pleasant, but you know what, reality isn't always extremely pleasant.
Pre-production, I thought, was going to be like real easy. Like, we're telling David Ellis, the Final Destination 2 director, yeah, we're going to be in pre-production till, I don't know, like 4 o'clock, and then we'll just come over to the set and have fun, right? And we had no idea that, I mean, it's just interview after interview and talking to your production designer down to like what shade of paint is going to be on that piece of furniture, down to the napkins on the tablecloths in the restaurant scene, and it's never ending. The problem is we have answers for all these questions. Because we had a small budget, we would have to storyboard many, many sequences. Sometimes kids are in dangerous situations and you have to storyboard everything out, or there's special effects, or Ashton's in a wheelchair and he's got no arms, and you really have to know exactly what angle you're shooting everything, because it's going to change how the prosthetics apply, the fake arms and all that stuff. So I think by the end of it, we had like 80% of the movie storyboarded.
Yeah, just because we did have a lot of effects, especially all the transitions between realities and stuff, and so yeah, there was so much little detail in the movie, we had to give everybody the blueprint or everyone would get lost.
Originally, we had a cast that we went to kind of go and finance the film with, and due to like all sorts of circumstances, that didn't come about. And then Ashton got hold of the script, and after he read it, you know, he kind of felt like this was something he really wanted to do. And then we were able to get it to Amy, who became available. And they ended up being perfect for the movie, and they were exactly what we were looking for. And for Ashton, it's like a real turn for him to do something like this. Going away from comedy, doing something a bit darker, a hell of a lot more dramatic and a thriller like this. But that's kind of what makes it exciting for us. And he kind of stepped into this and he, you know, completely showed a completely different side of himself to us, which we're lucky to have.
I did a lot more research for this character than I've ever done before. I spent 2 months learning psychology, which was something I never studied, and studying these specific disorders and people that have them and their stories, and you know, and really trying to get inside this character's head to an extent.
That's the hardest thing with this project. It was not only just like, all right, let's go find kids that would be perfect for these roles. It's like we had to go and find lookalikes for our 4 main leads. And not only one set of lookalikes, but we had to get 2 sets of lookalikes. Definitely the odds are against you, but somehow the casting gods were smiling on us and we got them. When we were first doing this project, from, you know, crew members to cast, we were like, all right, you know, 2 directors, and sometimes when people hear 2 directors, it seems kind of weird. You know, there's plenty of them out there, but, you know, it's not common.
As directors, John controls the style of the film. He's more in charge of the look, the way it aesthetically looks, the way the camera is moving, what he wants as his background, the colors, you know, the film stock, these kind of things. And then Eric is more of your acting coach. He, you know, follows the emotional lines of the script and is, you know, kind of our liaison to what they want as a team. But, you know, that doesn't stop John from running in every once in a while either, or Eric from setting up a shot every once in a while. So it's, you know, it's an interesting dynamic.
They have a wonderfully economic way of dividing and conquering and handling problems that flare up and keeping the ball rolling. I enjoy it.
They usually give each other ideas, and one of them comes to us and shares that idea, unless they're really passionate and they both come full charge. But I have to say, Eric and Jonathan are just really easy to work with, and they know the story, which is you know, so helpful.
The reason it was great is because they were both on the same page. They both knew, they were both, maybe they're two heads, two ideas, but they always had the same answer. Two heads on the same body, I guess, is one way to say it.
You know, as a producer, it's incredible. You know, you have two guys to handle 400 problems versus one guy. And they really do, in a weird way, share a brain.
Well, they're very much in sync with each other.
These guys are maniacs. I love being around people who really care. It's refreshing.
And the great thing about having them around as directors is they can justify everything because they've thought about it. They've been in this script for 7 years. This has been in their minds for 7 years. So they can justify every line in the script. They can justify every motion, every movement in the script.
When we first showed up and when we shot the film in Vancouver, we wanted to shoot inside a prison. Eric and I were fans of the film Slam, and we liked how it was really raw when they shot inside a prison within Washington, D.C., and so we told the producers, well, we want to shoot in a prison. The problem in Canada is all of the big, especially Western Canada, all of the big sort of big house prisons had been knocked down. So we couldn't get that, and so I was trying to convince the production, well, we'll go back over to the border and we'll go into Washington State and we'll shoot it there. No, it's not going to happen. I'm like, seriously, we'll use the real prisoners? And I'm like, you're crazy. It's not going to happen. Cut to, we're in Washington State. We had 125 actual prisoners as our extras, and it was super maximum security, and it was crazy, but I think it did add a level of realism that you're just like, this is real, this is scary. Our fight choreographer, James Bam Bam, he's awesome. He really did a great time. He was loving it because most directors tell him, like, hold back. You know, I know it's real, but, you know, I don't know, it looks a little violent. I'm like, come on, a little bit extra. So, and he did an excellent job.
All the fight scenes were really cool in that all of the actors didn't even want stuntmen there. I mean, everyone has a very physical or sports-oriented background. Ashton, Willie, Scott, like, they both fight, they both box, they can take care of themselves that way. So they didn't want any of the stunt people around. But more interestingly, I think to me, were the kids who, you know, all they do all day is, you know, skateboard and fall down and get right back up. And we're sitting there with JP, who plays the 13-year-old Evan, and we're sort of in this hotel room rehearsing. And we're like, yeah, well, when the stunt people come in, you're gonna probably like get hit by a 2x4 and fly backwards. And he's like this? And he just springs off and lands flat on his back and then like pops right back to his feet. And we're like, yeah, like that, kinda.
It was so great that everybody was so physical that there's no stuntmen really in the whole film. Maybe a couple of sequences. Just because we had them there and we felt bad we didn't use them, but like, yeah, the kids definitely had it all.
The junkyard scene was really fun to shoot because the kids are totally into it, and it's really violent. It's the kind of thing where maybe half of it made it into the movie because there were so many kicks to the ribs and punches and swinging people in the face with a 2x4. I think one of the biggest gasps we get in the movie is when 13-year-old Kaylee gets hit with a 2x4, and the whole audience, you can just count on this. It's just really violent and unexpected. But we have them working with, like, I mean, it's a rubber piece of 2x4 and stuff like that with like a little rubber fake nail coming out. And it's really scary because you just watch these kids and their natural instincts are so perfect. The kids were just amazing.
Everybody in the movie that I've acted with and worked with, they've all impressed me. Like, everyone has done something that I went, wow, I had no idea that was coming, or you had no idea. And I hope in the same light that I'm doing that as well, and that people are gonna go, wow, I had no idea this kid could do this stuff, you know.
Ashton is an amazing, incredibly intelligent, incredibly insightful actor who delivers on every take. He delivers when he's off camera. He doesn't flub lines. He is there in the moment, as dependable as can be.
I've never really seen him do dramatic work. to see that he's such a professional actor where, you know, for his comedic stuff, he definitely knows how to do that. And then just to really see him studying hard and working hard on his character and his parts. And us working off each other and really trusting each other to go to whatever extreme levels we want to and feeling open about it. And it's fun with Ashton and I because we'll go from this dramatic moment to like the sorority fraternity house, you know, to this another dramatic moment at the seedy diner. It's been a great journey because we're just constantly on this roller coaster of different emotions and different places and trying to keep up with like, where's my character at, what's happened, you know, because it's so detailed, this script, and so intricate the way the past and present keeps merging.
Amy's gonna surprise people, and people are gonna stand up and go, who's Amy Smart? Wow.
As an actor, this is like a dream role to play 4 different characters. She's really had a hard childhood and been sexually abused by her father and just her mom not being there. Kaylee, as naturally, she turns out to be a pretty depressed, lonely girl working in a diner. And then through all the incarnations when he goes back and changes each bit of time, and circumstances, I come back as a sorority girl, as just a heroin junkie prostitute, and then the natural sort of hippie girl. And it's great. It's been so much fun.
The one thing that I do that I'm proud of the project is that it's really unpredictable. And especially, you know, we become cynical as writers where we can see, you know, in the craft of every setup payoff and seeing things telegraphed miles away. But, you know, there's no way with this film, and I kind of like that because those are the movies I enjoy. I want to go on that roller coaster ride.
I got in trouble for a drawing I didn't do. Mommy won't let me see it.
When we first started writing, we were like, we're gonna write it so it's so low budget that we'll be able to do it and no one will say no. And so everything was like no effects. Let's go, as soon as you're going back in time, it's gonna be a straight cut, maybe a flash of white, and maybe it's just, yeah, even more like startling, like what reality, everything like that. And as we progressed, and as this also became a studio film, and we started talking about it, like, you know, everyone was like, well, yeah, you definitely need effects. And we thought more about it, and we're like, nah, it's gonna enhance it. The effects are gonna be better. And we just jumped right in.
When I was on set, I was trying to come up with some concepts, and I had Chris order some butterflies, and we were, you know, I didn't want to do the normal, they came up with the butterfly effect. I thought, well, what in the heck is the butterfly effect? And so I started thinking about butterflies, and they're kind of almost 2D, you know, they're kind of cutouts. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have depth, a lot of depth as you're moving through the frame for the directors, you know, because this film's all about depth. It's all about psychology, and so when I was on set, I was looking at, they were doing some playback, and they were doing a brain scan, a CAT scan of Ashton's head. And there was a looped piece of footage playing back, and I thought, that looks like a butterfly to me. And it was, you know, just kind of vibrating a little bit, and I thought, that'll work.
One of the big things that we try to do is really reference films that they're talking about, and go off of that. And quite often we'll take video cameras out and shoot our own material far, you know, before anything ever happens in production. And you know, the visual effects guys will run out there and we'll get our own little plates and start working with and manipulating that footage so that we have a good idea of what, you know, we're going to be shooting on the set. The original concept that the directors had was that every little object in Evan's room, or wherever Evan was, every little object that he had would shimmer and shake independently from each other. So his books, the sheets on his bed, you know, his posters, his computer, they would all shake independently from themselves as he was transitioning back into time. We did several shots with this effect. We applied that to several shots, and it just didn't lend itself, it didn't meet their expectations on screen. It was almost an idea that was a bit better served on paper than it was on screen. So we revisited that concept, and the directors finally, phoned up Ralph one day and said, "Ralph, just make everything shake," you know. And so So we let the artists just have at her, and we made everything shake, and the guys went, pretty overboard, and they were unleashed, and they came up with some really creative stuff. And it was up to Ralph and the directors to kind of reel them in and make sure that the tone of the visual effects were consistent with the tone of the movie.
The directors were both writers and directors, so we got a kind of a global thought on the whole thing from them. And then I hit them with a lot of visuals. We immediately, as soon as we picked up the show, we got in there and we started just taking early visualizations and throwing them up in front of them and just trying to get feedback, because I needed to get online with them, kind of figure out where their heads were at, and we used that, and that really helped tie us in pretty quickly. Pre-visualization was the key in this one.
One of the early things that we R&D'd early on was the words dancing around the journals. And Ralph and I and a few other guys, we went out and shot some journals and some words, and we began the process of fleshing that out. But in the script it says, the words dance around the page, but how do they dance around the page? Does the entire line of words dance around the page? Do the words themselves dance around the page, or do the letters dance around the page, etc.? So that's where we began with this film, and we began far before we went to camera, probably a month or two beforehand. Yeah, the guys at Toy Box, we were responsible for all of the memory flashes. Peter edited the sequences together, and then he gave us a rough cut, and at which point we took the ball and ran with it. And the initial feedback from the directors were that they wanted these sequences to be super saturated, to be really surreal, but to have the skin tones of everybody consistent and normal. So we did a lot of tests practically in the lab, and bleach bypass and whatnot, and just we were having problems keeping the skin tones of the actors consistent. So we had to resort to After Effects and make the entire sequences visual effects, and yeah, After Effects was used for a lot of the color correction and time remapping of the sequences, and we used a lot of After Effects on the show, and it was a great tool for us. There's two important things to think about when we're talking about Evan waking up in bed without any arms, and that's the combination of the CG skin and blending that with Ashton's real skin. And the second thing that's really important about this shot is the motion of the camera.
The shot initially was just going to be Ashton sitting up into frame, and it was a little dry. There wasn't much drama there, and the directors weren't too hip on it. They wanted to push that envelope, and of course, this was a small film. It wasn't a big budget for MoCo or for any of the high-tech gear that we would normally bring in for that kind of thing. So I sat with Matt Leonetti and the two directors in the room, and we just bantered for a while, and we came up with this move, this camera move that comes up off Ashton and pulls back and settles as he sits up into frame. And there were several problems with the shot, but having been an artist myself for years, I knew what we could get away with and what we couldn't. And so we were able to use that to get away with a shot that normally you wouldn't be able to pull off in this budget as well, that just you wouldn't know. I mean, the whole plate had to be rebuilt. We had shadows crossing pillows of his arm, I mean, his arm was really there, so we had to remove all that. And he had shadows that crossed the pillow, and the pillow, at one point his arm depresses the pillow, so that had to be fixed. The flesh, the matching of the flesh and everything was extremely well done. I'm still very proud of how they pulled that off. So we have all these little pieces that I'll know and the artists will know, and we'll all be staring at it going, wow, it works.
The first thing that we did to help blend the CG skin with Ashton's real skin is actually go out and take real pictures of Ashton's skin. So we took close-ups, stills of his skin, several shots, and then later on down the road we stitched those all together and provided texture for the 3D model, at which point that was applied to. And the other major key to this shot is the motion of the shot. And unfortunately, the budget of this film didn't really lend itself to big setups and big rigs and motion controls and whatnot. So we had a fantastic camera operator in Dolly Group, and they accomplished what we needed to just simply with a dolly and a camera move, and they were able to repeat their moves constantly for us, and we needed several plates for this shot.
And I guess the tricky part of that shot was that we had to match him getting up and dollying back at the same speed, and we didn't use motion control, so we had to count either by osmosis or a stop clock. The dolly had to be pulled back just absolutely perfect, and but we pulled it off, and I think we did it within like a 10th or quarter of a second. So I think they were able to match up in the computer. Otherwise, it'd been a motion control shot, and that would have probably been a little more expensive than we did.
We had 3 of these mailboxes. They're expensive to build. And we weren't sure how it was. The directors wanted it to come apart, and there's all about how much packing you want and how much depth cord, and it can come apart in many different ways. And it's all about how much big of a fireball you want, and this whole thing. And this is supposed to be like a little bigger than an M100. It was like an M80. I used to blow up mailboxes with M80s, and that's like pop. But the directors wanted it, a little bigger than that. So we went and we did an explosion. And the explosion that we put in there was pretty big. And so then we did a rough comp. We put the AD's son in there and blew him up. And we showed that to the directors, and they thought that was great. And then obviously they sat on that for a day, right? They thought about it for a day. And the next thing I know, the next day, the explosion was twice as big. And it actually, when we actually shot the shot, the explosion was so big, it was beyond the camera point of view. So we had to reshoot it again. So now we're on our last mailbox, and it's getting dark. It was just one of those days, it was the end of the shoot day. We'd already lost one. And so we got it all back, got it together, exploded it. It's kind of interesting what we did. Because it was getting late and everything, we ended up isolating the mailbox and putting it into a hero shot that was shot earlier in the day. And then we, of course, had to dress up some of the sides of the mailbox and everything before it explodes. But yeah, so we got it on the last explosion and got away with it.
The last thing I remember before the blackout was holding my hands over Kaylee's ears.
When you're a writer-director and you're thinking these things through, and you're reading your script over and over again, and then you start to go, okay, well, I've seen this 100 times. I'm tired of this. If I'm, Joe Blow in the theater, I don't want to see this effect again. I want to see something new and fresh. So they obviously had a meeting earlier, and Matt came up with an idea of, instead of doing some more wiggly words or something like that, of doing this revolving shot where the whole room starts to transition and move. And I thought, oh, that's really cool, but I don't have motion control. I don't have, there was like all these I don't haves. So we came up with a solution for that. And it was a pretty good solution. We ended up doing a green screen behind Ashton on a dolly attached to the camera dolly, and it was all on one round track. And so the green screen was constantly behind him as it rotated, and we lit those with Kinoflows.
With lighting him, so we couldn't put lights above. We didn't want lights on top. We wanted lights, I think we put the lights below him, and obviously couldn't see the lights. I didn't want a lot of top light on him at the time. So, and keeping that light off of him, keeping that light on him, I think we had to take a couple of dimmers and dim one light out, dim one light on as we went around. So we had to kind of time that so we didn't get flares, and the speed of the dolly was critical, that we made it pretty much the same speed and when we did the room and when we did him. So that was a tricky one.
Well, effects are always there to support the plot, and my hope is that it isn't overbearing, and that it does. I mean, the directors, right from the beginning, it was a global thought. They thought about everything. I mean, everything had its place, and it was well thought out. It wasn't an effect just because they wanted an effect. It was there for a reason, and it was there to strike a chord in the theater goer, and hopefully it'll do that.